Delighted to welcome Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron, hot foot from the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting. We've spent a couple of hours here talking about the issues on NATO's agenda. You are the best placed of all, Foreign Secretary, to tell us about them. No introduction needed. My old boss back. It's delightful to see you. I could just say perhaps that since your nomination in November, I don't think you've spent a day at home. I mean, you've been absolutely throwing yourself into the thick of all the diplomacy in this crisis-ridden world, not least Ukraine and supporting Ukraine and making NATO strong to do that. So we are all delighted to hear you, and the floor is yours, Foreign Secretary.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Peter. I woke up listening to Peter Ricketts this morning on my radio, and now at tea time, I feel you bookended my day. So thank you very much. Great to be here in this house that has many memories for me, as you can imagine. I think of all those European councils where I spent late nights and early mornings here, and it's very good to be back. 75 years. NATO is 75 years old. I am 57 years old, but I hope there's more than just the symmetry of that I bring to this discussion. I feel I played my part in NATO's development. I'm very proud that I chaired that 2014 NATO conference in Cardiff, when I think at that stage only 3 countries met the 2% spending floor, not ceiling, floor, and now we're in a situation where over 20 countries out of the 32 meet that target, and NATO is incomparably stronger. And I always feel that NATO wasn't something I had to learn about or understand. I feel I grew up with it. I was born and brought up just between Greenham Common, where the cruise missiles were stationed, and Aldermaston, where our nuclear program was centred. The first country and countries I visited as an adult were the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. So I never needed reminding or understanding of the vital importance of NATO in our national life. And it's been extraordinary having supported it all through its quiet years in which some people wondered whether it had a functioning brain. I never lost faith in NATO. I always kept the faith in NATO, and it's great to be celebrating its 75th anniversary, and a 75th anniversary when it is so much stronger today than it has been for years. And today, of course, at the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting, we welcome Sweden for the first time as a full participant. And to bring 2 countries, Finland and Sweden, into NATO, both so highly capable militarily, so financially strong, so knowledgeable about their region and their military obligations, definitely makes NATO stronger. I wanted just to talk in my 10 minutes, because you've had a long day. Why is NATO so successful? What is next for NATO? And what will truly determine its success or failure in the years ahead? Why it's so successful? I think you have to go back to 1948 and something Ernie Bevin said. He said when they founded NATO, decisions we take now will be vital to the future peace of the world. And that was absolutely prophetic and right. But I think the heart of NATO's success is its incredible simplicity. The simplicity of Article 5, that an attack on one is an attack on all, is something that all participants and all people could understand. And of course, it was combined with that sense when it was founded of a clear and growing threat. And most of NATO's life has had that clear threat, and we certainly have that today. And its success has been based on its continued expansion. What is next for NATO? Well, it's clear that while NATO is not a participant in the conflict in Ukraine, the outcome of what happens in Ukraine is, in my view, absolutely vital to the future of Ukraine. And that is why, one of the reasons why Britain so strongly supports Ukraine's struggle. I was meeting earlier with the Slovak foreign minister, and I pointed out something that not a lot of people know, which is my closest, not living, but relative who was in politics before me from my family, was a man called Duff Cooper, who resigned in 1938 because of the Munich conference and the decision to dismember Czechoslovakia. And to me, what we face today is as simple as then. We have a tyrant in Europe who's trying to redraw borders by force, and there are two choices. You can appease that approach, or you can confront that approach. It is undoubtedly the right thing to confront it, and that is what we're doing by giving Ukraine such strong support. And I very much see with Ukraine there are two futures that are open to NATO and to Europe and to countries like Britain. There is a future where we support Ukraine, where Putin does not win in Ukraine, where Ukraine recovers its territory and is capable of having a just peace. And that future is an incredibly bright one for Britain, for Europe, for NATO. It's a future where NATO will be strong, everyone will see the strength of its alliance, everyone will recognize that Ukraine should be and will be a part of NATO, and the capability of NATO would have grown even stronger. And people will see that we in the West are capable of standing up to a threat of this magnitude. But there is another future for NATO, for the West, for Britain, and that is one where we allow Ukraine to fail, we allow Putin to succeed, and the celebrations will be held mostly in Moscow, and of course in Beijing, and in Tehran, and in North Korea. And that is a very bleak future, not only because I believe other European countries would be at risk, but I think all of the world would look around at America and Britain and European powers and wonder how willing we were to stand up for our allies, how reliable we were as an ally. And even the absolute key to NATO of Article 5, allies in Europe would start looking to each other and wondering how much they could really trust each other when they said they were going to stand up for each other and stand by and oppose aggression. So I think the biggest test for European nations is this issue of Ukraine, and that is why it is my number one priority as Foreign Secretary, and something that this government is giving so much effort and thought and resources to. But of course it's not the only threat and the only issue that NATO has to face in terms of what is next. We face an incredibly dangerous and difficult and disputational world with so many conflicts. We have the instability in the Middle East, instability in Africa, more conflicts in Africa than perhaps we've had for the last 40 years. And of course we had a timely reminder last week with the issue of China's cyber attacks on the very heart of our democracy, that we face threats not only in terms of the Russian threat, but also the threat that we face of instability to our south, and of course the issues emerging out of the Indo-Pacific into our own region. And NATO has a role to play in addressing all of those threats. And the UK is determined to support all of the NATO strategies in dealing with those threats. Final point I wanted to make is what will determine the success or failure of NATO in the future. Now, of course, there's some very simple, Treasury-like technical answers to that. I think the success will depend on more and more countries reaching 2%, or more countries seeing 2% as a floor and not a ceiling, and we see such great progress there. A large part of the answer will be how capable NATO is of modernizing all our armed forces and making sure their compatibility, their interoperability. A lot of NATO's success will depend on when we make Ukraine a member, and what a capable member with such professional and capable armed forces as we have seen. But I would say the biggest determinant of success or failure goes back to what I said right at the start, which is that I grew up believing in NATO because it had a relevance to my life. If you came of age politically in the 1980s, you could see the importance of the solidarity that NATO brought. You could see the importance of the strong defence that kept Europe and Britain safe. But can we actually say that about future generations who haven't grown up with that knowledge but have grown up in a different situation? And I think we have to win the argument for NATO all over again with a new generation, a generation that can see, yes, look at the threat that Ukraine has faced from Russia, but I think we need to go back to a more foundational argument, which is this, that fundamentally the greatness of NATO is it allows countries to choose their own future. When I look at my colleagues from Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, when I look at Radek Sikorski from Poland, when I look at people whose countries chose to join NATO after the fall of the Iron Curtain, NATO membership is really what gave them the ability to make a choice about the sort of country they would be and the sort of values they would follow. And I think that is an incredibly strong values-based argument that a younger generation can understand and see. And I'll just give you one figure to back it up. When the Iron Curtain fell and Poland recovered its ability to govern itself effectively, its economy was 3 times the size of that of Belarus. Today, its economy is 10 times the size of Belarus. There's no reason, if you think about it, why Ukraine is many times poorer than Poland. Very similar countries, very similar parts of the world. And it's this ability that NATO gives to allow countries to choose to be democracies, to choose to have rights, to choose to have the rule of law, to choose to adopt an open market trading system and form those sorts of relations with other countries. That is the argument I think we need to make today. That is the argument that can help us win all over again the backing for NATO that it will need as we ask our publics to fund and to support defence budgets and NATO budgets, as we ask NATO to do more, not just in supporting what we're doing in Ukraine, but also supporting what we need to do in a more unstable and more unsafe world. So I feel more confident as a 57-year-old supporting a 75-year-old that I'm backing a winner. It's been a winner. It's been the most successful defensive alliance in the history of the world. And if we back it financially and back it in its expansion, but also back it with this values-based argument, there's no reason it won't have another 75 years of extraordinary success. Thank you very much.